यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो?
आता हूँ।
Indeed, my honor to welcome this August gathering on behalf of Human Rights Law Network. It is our privilege to have received such a positive response to our invitation for this judicial colloquium. And we really hope that the colloquium will fulfill its primary mandate to facilitate an open and rigorous exchange of ideas and information among the honorable justices. Dalit and disability rights are two of the more difficult areas of human rights that we are working on, and we really hope to gain in our advocacy also on this issue. We are deeply grateful to National Human Rights Commission to have supported this colloquium. I now invite Honorable Dr. Shivraj V. Patil, Honorable Member NHRC, to the dais. May I also invite Mr. Justice A.P. Shah to the dais and Mr. Justice Vikramjit Sen. Justice B.A. Khan and Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul will join us shortly. Justice Shivraj V. Patil, who is now the member of National Human Rights Commission, had begun his practice in the year 1962 and had a roaring practice in both civil and criminal sides before he was elevated as a judge, High Court of Karnataka in 1990. He was later transferred to the Madras High Court, where he was also the acting Chief Justice. He was later the Chief Justice of the Rajasthan High Court, and he was elevated as the Judge of the Supreme Court of India in March 2000. He remitted the office of the Justice Supreme Court of India in 2005, after which he joined as a member of the National Human Rights Commission of India in February 2005. I now invite Justice Patil to deliver the keynote address for this colloquium.
Very good morning to everybody. The distinguished judges participating in this colloquium, the distinguished brother judges on the dais, Mr. Colin Galvanis, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to participate in this National Judicial Colloquium. I am deeply delighted to deliver my keynote address. The establishment of the United Nations and the proclamation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights were two great events in 20th century. The 21st century begins with two historic events. One, the new initiatives by poor and rich nations in fulfilling a long unfinished agenda of full human development and human rights for all. Two, the Millennium Development Goals emanating from the Millennium Declaration adopted by 189 countries at the United Nations Millennium Summit in September 2000. By 2015, the United Nations Millennium Development Goals are expected to be realized to end poverty, promote human dignity, and equality, and to take steps in furtherance of the attack on inadequate incomes, widespread hunger, gender inequality, environmental deterioration, and lack of education, health care, and clean water, to see human development and human rights in action. As per the census of 2001, India has 22 million persons with disability. According to some other observers, actual number of Indians with temporary or permanent disability could be 50 million. The number of persons with disability is the largest in our country. The census figure shows that the highest percentage of disabled is in the visual impairment category, being 48.5%, followed by disability in movement, 26.9%, while the lowest have been reported in those having hearing disability, 5.8%. It is unfortunate that the number of disabled is increasing in all age groups. Facing this reality, the concern of our country has to be far more intense comparatively. Although the Constitution guarantees persons with disability the full range of civil, political, economic, cultural and social rights, till recently, appropriate arrangements for realization of these rights were not in place. After crossing several obstacles, the human rights approach to disability has resulted in evolution of an impressive legal framework, and positive jurisprudence has clarified the content of the rights in the context of disability. Special input is created specially for those who are obliged to implement and provide remedies. The National Human Rights Commission has identified lack of capacity of various institutions and individuals as a central obstacle in the substantive realization of human rights of persons with disabilities. It goes without saying that when the new laws and procedures are adopted, the need for special inputs is created, especially for those who are vested with the responsibility to implement, enforce and monitor. Over the last decade or so, Government of India has put in place an impressive legal framework with a clear focus on disability. But lack of awareness on the part of the persons with disabilities and field functionaries has contributed for a slow progress. Even after one decade of enactment of the Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of Rights and Full Protection Act 1995, the governments and people at large are not fully conscious of rights of persons with disabilities, and the lack of real concern for implementing the Persons with Disabilities Act 1995 can be seen as inaction on the part of the state governments in planning for the disabled. The long-term benefits of incorporating human rights perspective in the formal and non-formal programs of study are immeasurable. A new generation of human rights sensitive practitioners and administrators would certainly play an instrumental role in further democratization of the society, in which human rights for all would certainly be better protected. Since the awakening about the rights of persons with disabilities is a recent phenomenon, the NHRC has taken a number of steps towards integrating this awareness at all levels of training for government administrators and other professionals. The Commission has advised Government of India and the state governments to introduce disability components in all their training initiatives and in the development plans. The efforts of some of the institutes like Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy, Mussoorie, Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi, and Institute of Secretarial Planning and Management, New Delhi, are acknowledged with appreciation, and it is hoped that the state governments and union territories would follow suit. The commitment of the state for better protection and promotion of rights of all is aptly reflected in the recent initiatives. The Commission would like to encourage a dynamic approach to human rights education that is capable of giving its beneficiaries the capability to effectively deliver their role and responsibilities respecting human rights for all, including persons with disabilities. The 3% reservation in employment and education provided in Act remained dormant until a public interest petition was filed in the Supreme Court. It was only thereafter that the identification of the post designated took place 9 years after the enactment of 1995. The Act contains very useful provisions for free education of disabled children, requiring the state to provide them free transportation, books, and the like. Chapter 5 of the Act 1995 specially deals with the education of persons with disabilities, as can be seen from sections 26 to 31, mobilizing governments and local authorities for providing free education, non-formal education, new assertive devices, teaching aids, etc., and to set up special teachers training institutes providing transport facilities, books, etc., and to provide avances to students with visual handicap. Still, the progress in this regard is not much. Mainstreaming of children is a state policy, but its implementation is not at all impressive. Particularly in rural areas, the condition of disabled children is most pathetic. The public schools do not have sign language interpreters or facilities for blind. Even the facilities for the locomotor disabled remain primitive. Mostly, the commissioners appointed under the Act were invariably holding substantive posts elsewhere, and they could not pay much attention to the cause of disability. Some time back, a news item appeared in newspapers where the disabled rights group has demanded a separate ministry to look into the demands of the physically challenged. The Commission acknowledges and appreciates the good work done or being done by NGOs, social activists, and other institutions. Sincere approach, serious efforts, and implementation of laws, plans, and programs with committed and concern will better serve the human rights of the persons with disabilities. Let us bear in mind that the persons with disabilities are equally entitled to the full range of human rights like any other section of people. They should not be viewed as objects of charity and protection rather than the subjects of rights. Fight for the rights of the persons with disability should not merely be an event, but it must be an effective movement to see that the rights are really observed and enforced. On the International Day of Disabled Persons on 3rd December 2005, the President of India, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, in his message said, I quote, "Over the years, a large number of people with disabilities and institutions have demonstrated their unique capabilities and have presented excellent role model to society. Their courage, willpower to achieve, and tireless efforts are laudable. I appeal to all sections of the society to promote an inclusive, barrier-free, and race-based society." Unquote. Dr. Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister of the country, on the same occasion, in his message, gave a call to the nation in the following words. I quote, "On this day, let us rededicate ourselves for evolving a new social order based on equality and prosperity for all." I quote. Srimati Meera Kumar, Minister for Social Justice and Empowerment, in her message has stated thus: "The government is striving for protection and promotion of rights, opportunities, and dignity of persons with disabilities. Our endeavor has been to create a barrier-free, accessible environment. Government programs have been directed towards physical, educational, and economic rehabilitation of the persons with disabilities, so that they may participate on equal terms in the development of the nation." Unquote. Let us hope matters will be activated, accelerated, and will move forward consistent with these messages coming from the responsible persons in realizing the goals set for the persons with disability under the various legislations and schemes. Here is the story of 3 courageous and successful survivors living life to the fullest, as told to the Times of India on 4th December 2005. a day after World Disability Day. Aslam Amin lost his both legs at the age of 5 in train accident. After undergoing treatment for a year, he joined school in Meerut. For this cheerful child, going to school every day was itself a challenge, but by his courage and determination, he got the Best Student Award in class 10. He is 26 now, working as a software engineer with a leading company in Delhi. He says, I quote his words, "My life has always been a struggle. Even everyday chorus like bathing and sleeping are difficult. But I have always had a positive attitude. I know that come what may, I will not get my legs back. So instead of blaming my destiny, I decided I would aim at achieving whatever I can." Unquote. Yet another story of our Manikandan lost his eyesight due to medical negligence at the age of 14. He was hospitalized for 3 years and days ahead looked dark for him, but he did not lose confidence. He did his schooling and later MCom, MPhil and B.Ed. Not resting at that, he is pursuing a degree in PhD. Currently he is teaching accountancy in a college in Pollachi in Tamil Nadu. His philosophy is, I quote, "One can tackle the biggest hurdle if one has the courage to do so." Unquote. The third story, a terrorist attack in 1986 left him paralyzed for life when he was working as a senior administrative officer in Indian Railways. After undergoing treatment for about 14 months, he joined back service and was promoted to his senior special secretary grade. Within a span of few years, looking to his merit and performance, he got 2 more promotions and retired as the general manager of Indian Railways. He is none other than Sarbjit A. Singh. He says, I quote, "Disability has not stopped me from doing what I could have done otherwise. Some of my seniors doubted my ability. They thought I would not be able to perform well because of my handicap, but I proved them wrong." Unquote. I may quote the Kevet Robert, known as the Dean of Public Speaking, long back said, I quote, "While I can run, I will run. While I can walk, I will walk. While I can crawl, I will crawl. But by the grace of God, I always will be moving forward." The 3 persons aforementioned, the stories of these 3 persons, have demonstrated how they could move forward notwithstanding exclusion and adversity. Looking to them, I could understand the substance and dimension of the statement of Kevet Robert better. In the journey of the persons with disability, in moving forward, the state, civil society, NGOs, and other people immediately around them, either at home or at the education institution or at their workplace, should do their best to avoid exclusion and adversity to the persons with disability. They should fully support them always, remembering that the persons with disability too have right to live as anyone else. Notwithstanding the sound legal framework, the number of programs, schemes and rules, a lot more is required to be done for improving the conditions of persons with disability. These persons continue to suffer social, cultural and attitudinal barriers. One good development is that there is a growing realization that the disability is a pervasive dimension of the diverse human cultures like gender, race, religion and language. Disability rights are new dimension in the human rights. Intense efforts are needed to create awareness and enhance the capacity of various institutions and individuals to make the rights of the persons with disability really enjoyable, to which they are entitled. Mere making law and formulating schemes are not enough, and they are not the solutions to the problem. Law by itself cannot protect the rights of the persons with disability. The dedicated civil society organizations, honest and committed law enforcing agencies, independent media, proactive judiciary, and awareness of the rights and remedies in the matter of dealing with the realization of the rights of the person with disability can really and substantially help in protecting human rights of the persons with disability. One thing is very clear, that the success of any mission or movement depends on the persons engaged therein. In the final analysis, the results do depend on constructive attitude and positive mindset of the people working under the legal framework, however sound it may be. Will Durant says, I quote, "When one tries to change the institutions without having changed the nature of men, that unchanged nature will soon resurrect those institutions." Unquote. In the year 2003, the NHRC launched a project with Canadian Human Rights Commission and Indira Gandhi National Open University. The principal aim of NHRC, CHRU and IGNOR linkage project was to increase the capabilities and strength of both the commissions and their associated partners to cooperate to address measures to human rights issues in relation to persons with disability. This project has produced a Disability Manual 2005, which is published by NHRC. This manual can serve as a reference material for universities and law schools to design curricula for undergraduate and graduate studies programs in disability law and incorporate disability issues into the courses in family, criminal and corporate and labor laws. It is also hoped that it will prove to be an effective advocacy tool for organizations of disabled persons and NGOs working in the area of disability and human rights. It is also intended to be a practical guide for legal practitioners and general administrators. Human Rights Law Network, India has brought out a very useful publication, Disability and the Law, with a view to spread legal awareness throughout the country on the issues of disability rights. This publication puts together in one place comprehensive introduction of main judgments of the Indian courts. Besides, it gives a glimpse of the legal situation prevailing in the United States and to some other countries in Europe. This book is very useful to the disability sector, legal fraternity, NGOs, journalists and academics. When disabled person took up the challenge to test and try these laws in courts, demanding their actualization from the judiciary by filing cases, the gaps in the law surfaced. The ignorance, insensitivity and resistance of the non-disabled population were exposed. The judiciary got activated in delivering justice on the issues raised and relating to the human rights. Yet sheer grit and the correctness of the fight prevailed. It is clear that the disability rights jurisprudence has been gradually unfolding in India, picking up momentum with each passing year. Persons with disability routinely face violation with regard to their basic rights, including food, housing, education, health, work and social security. As a consequence, they suffer from poverty, malnutrition and chronic illness. Some of the most insidious of discrimination come with the imposition of physical and social barriers, a root cause for their exclusion and marginalization in the society. The formal equality discourse actually builds up on the idea of the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who said, I quote, that things that are alike should be treated alike, whereas things that are unlike should be treated unlike in proportion to their unalikeness, unquote. In the introduction to the UN Standard Rules on the Equalization of Opportunities for Persons with Disabilities 1993, the principle of equal rights is described as implying, I quote, that the needs of each and every individual are of equal importance, that those needs must be made on the basis of the planning of societies, and that all the resources must be employed in such a way as to ensure that every individual has equal opportunities of participation. Unquote. The Constitution of India is founded on the principles of equality and non-discrimination and promotes affirmative action. while laying down the philosophy of governance. Articles 14, 15 and 16 encourage introduction of positive measures with the right to equality have come under criticism, and the judiciary, while putting to rest the legality of such concept, has upheld that mere formal declaration of the right to equality would not make unequal sequel. Extending this logic, the Supreme Court of India, in the case of Dr. Jagdish Singh Sarand versus Union of India and others, observed, I quote, equality is not degraded or neglected where special provisions are geared to the larger good of the disabled, getting over the disablement consistently with the general good and individual merit, unquote. As disability rights is a new dimension in the human rights regime, much needs to be done to develop awareness and build capacity to various institutions, individuals and systems. In fact, no meaningful change can come about for persons with disabilities unless various social and economic processes of civic society are redefined on disability inclusive norms. To achieve the long-term goal of a society for all, we intend to facilitate collaborative initiatives in which the people with disabilities and their organizations have an important role to play. Despite having a sound legal framework, plethora of programs, schemes, rules, regulations, etc., corresponding improvements in the circumstances of persons with disabilities are not visible. The rate of illiteracy, unemployment, and poverty among the persons with disabilities is alarming. The transport, buildings, and information systems are designed on some old standards, though the law demands creation of barrier-free facilities. The state governments, local authorities, and panchayats have taken little care in fulfilling their obligations. A number of schemes have remained grossly underutilized. The recruitment rules and service regulations still have discriminatory provisions. Some improvements could be achieved with the court interventions. 55% of the complaint cases before the Chief Commissioner of Commissioners relate to service matters. Similarly, the barriers to education are deep-rooted. Many institutions, despite mandatory provision of 3% reservation of seats in educational institutions, denied admission to students on grounds of their disability. Honorable Supreme Court of India, in Rekha Tyagi vs. All India Institute of Medical Sciences and others, gave a clear verdict to the academic institutions to not only allow admission to the disabled students, but also to extend reservation according to Section 39 of the Act. In the name of social security schemes, government pays ₹100 or 200 per month to the unemployed persons with disabilities. There are hardly any short stay or long stay homes of the disabled people in crisis or in a situation of destitution. Maiming and blinding of children for begging has gone unchecked. Severe check and stringent measures are required to prevent injustice and cruelty to children in this regard. Similarly, intellectually challenged women and young girls are subjected to abuse of various kinds. The initiatives taken by Government of India during the 9th plan have been noteworthy, but the indifference of the state governments is a real challenge. The improvements in the ground reality without the involvement of grassroots organizations are difficult. Therefore, the effort should be made on activating the state and local authorities. The NHRC recognizes the urgent need to raise awareness throughout the society regarding the rights of the persons with disabilities. We believe that no tangible change is possible unless public administrators, legal practitioners, and service providers at all levels are aware of their obligations under the international and domestic laws towards persons with disabilities. The spiraling litigation on disability issues is a living example of indifference and ignorance on the part of the state authorities of their obligations under the various legislations. For instance, while remitting the case of Mamta Kumar Singh versus State of Bihar and others to NHRC, the High Court of Patna observed, and I quote, "The governments and people at large are not conscious of the rights of persons with disabilities, and the lack of interest in implementing the Persons with Disabilities Act 1995, that specially takes care of disabled persons. The lack of interest in implementing the act, which specially takes care of disabled persons, can be seen as inaction on the part of the state government planning for the disabled, unquote. The NHRC has adopted a twin-track approach in the building the capacity of various institutions and functionaries. On one hand, our effort is to mainstream disability perspective in all the ongoing public awareness and educational endeavors, and on the other, we have encouraged introduction of special training programs with a clear focus. Our implementation strategy is also twofold. While certain awareness and educational programs are offered directly by the Commission, but in majority cases, we network with the mainstream institutions. Before I conclude, I would only make one or two observations. I am proud of the Indian judiciary, and not because I belong to the same category, but by performance the Indian judiciary has distinguished not only here in the country, elsewhere in the world. I had occasion to attend a conference in South Africa, and there a constitutional court building was constructed in a place called Constitutional at Johannesburg. To celebrate their 10th year of independence, there was a famous ward called Ward number 4 at Johannesburg, where political prisoners used to be detained, including Nelson Mandela and others. To mark their celebration, they demolished the big area of Ward number 4, constructed a court for the building for the constitutional court of that country. All judges from different countries were invited. I had the good fortune of representing Supreme Court of India. They had arranged 2 days conference in connection with that. At the end of the conference, Chief Justice Jackelson of Constitutional Court of South Africa said, there would be a press conference and I should represent Asia, because from different countries some people are chosen. When the journalists, persons from media, both print and electronic, they started asking questions. Only I'll cut short. 2 important questions where Indian judiciary can be proud. For that I want to quote, because I see all the distinguished judges in this gathering. I can't resist my temptation but to quote here. Then the first question was, after great struggle, each country got freedom and they have got democracy and rule of law in their place, like India, South Africa and other places. If one party gets absolute majority in the House of the Parliament, as the case may be, can they amend the Constitution to take away the very fundamental rights or Bill of Rights, by whatever name they are called? I was at one end, from one end to the other, and everybody said, their representatives from different countries said yes. If they have got the requisite majority and follow the required procedure, any part can be amended. When it came to my turn to answer, I will not elaborate, we know what the position is. But I proudly said, in our constitution also there is a provision to amend any part of the constitution by the Indian judiciary, which has a by innovative, very constructive, and keeping in the public interest and democracy and rule of law said, how basic structure is to be seen. They all appreciated and said, this is a very unique position, we respect Indian judiciary. One. The second question was whether death penalty could be abolished. Some countries they said they have abolished. In some country the debate is going on. In some country, even without abolishing also, including South Africa, by interpreting the constitution, they have said the death penalty cannot do. When it came to us, our position is very clear. The rarest of the rare cases, I need not elaborate on the point. Then again said, this is something, there we have tried to balance the human rights on one side and the national security and social order on the other. This is how we blended for the time. There again, the role of Indian judiciary has been appreciated abroad. I wanted to share this with this August gathering. And we all belong to judiciary. We are very proud of it. Our country looks at judiciary with great hope. And I think we must rather we have already learned we must learn to listen to the dissidents from the deprived. And that maturity of learning, of listening, the dissident or dissidents from deprived will help us greatly. We have been very vibrant and responsive, and particularly the disabled persons need our greater concern. And I conclude by saying one thing which is required for every one of us, not only in judiciary but elsewhere. I very often quote this, I also plead saying this. To one function, a lady came. She looked very smart. The other ladies asked her, "Oh, you look so smart, what cosmetics you use?" Brother Justice Khan is here. He knows I quoted elsewhere also this, and he said that this very much appeals to everybody. So I thought I should do this. Then the other ladies asked, "Oh, what cosmetics you use? You look so smart." The reply of that global lady is very impressive. She said, "You want to know my cosmetics? Well, to my eyes pity, to my lips truth, to my voice prayer, to my heart love, to my hands charity, to my figure righteousness. These are my cosmetics." That was the answer of that lady. The anxious ladies, if they could ask the address where the cosmetics are available, perhaps nowhere in the no market these cosmetics are available. These are the cosmetics of the soul and not of the body. I think the soul is neither male nor female. Even the gentlemen require these cosmetics. These are the internal cosmetics. I think more so the judiciary to respond to the cause of disabilities. I am grateful to the Human Rights Law Network for giving me this opportunity to participate in this National Judicial Colloquium. I am doubly happy because I could see a number of my brother judges I had occasion to meet. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Justice Patil, for that moving keynote address. Before we go further, may I invite Chief Justice B.A. Khan to the dais. Chief Justice J. Khan of the J&K High Court, so please could you come to the dais. Chief Justice A.P. Shah has recently taken over as the 44th Chief Justice of the Madras High Court. He had earlier served as a judge in the Bombay High Court after he was elevated in the year 1992. Chief Justice Shah has been an unfailing friend and an ally of the human rights movement in the country, disability rights being one significant part of it. I now invite Chief Justice Shah to speak on his experiences on the disability law of the country.
Honorable Justice Shivraj Patil, distinguished judges, and ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share with you a recent experience of mine in a case of a person suffering from schizophrenia. I was sitting in a bench with Justice Dr. Dhananjay Chandrachud. The patient's brother filed a petition seeking a direction to Thane Mental Hospital to continue to detain him in the hospital till he is completely cured, and so certified by the Government Medical Board of General Hospital, Mumbai. The petition was admitted and an interim direction was passed on 17/4/1995 restraining the hospital authorities from discharging the patient till he is completely cured. In 1997, he was declared to be fully cured and fit to be discharged from the hospital. And a letter to that effect was also sent to the registry of the Bombay High Court. Unfortunately, no action was taken pursuant to that letter, and he continued to be detained in the mental hospital for next 8 years. In April 2005, this matter came to be placed before us, that is myself and Justice Chandrachud, and it came to light that the interim order remained in force for almost 10 years. We issued notices to the concerned authorities and directed to release the patient forthwith. His brother agreed to look after him. The matter was adjourned to consider the issue of awarding damages. On the next day of hearing, we were told that the patient's family refused to take him back, and he had gone back to the mental hospital. The question of rehabilitation of this person proved to be extremely difficult. His family was not prepared to take him back. We tried very hard to find an appropriate institution where he could be accommodated. On making inquiries, we were told that there are no community care programs for such persons, although such programs exist in some European and American America. Finally, after consulting him and the doctor of the mental hospital, we decided to place him in an elders' home at Lonavala near Mumbai. I was really worried whether he would adjust with the new environment. Of course, we made past orders for awarding him damages, and the amount was kept in bank, and he used to receive the interest from that particular deposit. But sometime in November, just before I left Mumbai, I received a message from the patient thanking both of us. He said that for 10 years he lived in hell, and now he feels that he is in paradise, and he is very happy in the elders' home. This was a learning process for both of us, where we had an occasion to interact with a patient of a schizophrenia. I do not know his future, but at least now he is well settled in the elders' home. It is said that there are 600 million persons with disabilities in the world today. 80% of them live in developing countries. As Honorable Justice Shivraj Patil said, around 22 million people in India suffer from different types of disabilities. One estimate is that the persons suffering from disabilities are 50 million. That is because how we look at the disability and how we define the disability, that would define the number of the persons, disabled persons in the country. Disabled people today are a vast minority group who have been subjected to direct and indirect discrimination for centuries in this country. According to the thinking of disability rights movement, it is not so much the disabled individual who needs to change, but the society needs to change. It may be automatic assumption that a man in a wheelchair cannot get round to do his job. It may be an employer's refusal to hire a polio-stricken person or someone with epilepsy, or a larger societal failure to build offices, houses, hostels and stores accessible to people on wheelchair. Disability right activist Judy Heumann says, and I quote her words, "Disability only becomes a tragedy for me when society fails to provide the things we need to lead our lives. Job opportunities or barrier-free buildings, for example. It is not a tragedy to me that I am living in a wheelchair. An individual may be impaired by a condition that requires daily living adaptations, but the bulk of his problem, his disability, is found in attitudinal and physical barrier erected by the society." Well, ladies and gentlemen, in the wake of Beijing Meet in 1992, the Parliament enacted the Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of Rights and Participation Act 1995, to be hereafter referred as PWD Act, which was brought into force on 17/1996. Then Parliament has enacted certain other statutes on the disability. One is the Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992. The other is National Trust for Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities Act 1999. The main design and goal of PWD Act is to provide infrastructure, funds management for the purpose of charting out affirmative actions in favor of persons covered under the Act. I would like to take you to some of the provisions of the Act. I want to compare them with the American Disabilities Act. But before that, I would like to refer to only few provisions of the Indian Constitution. The Supreme Court has ruled that Article 14 does not merely guarantee formal equality, but espouses the substantive equality. Substantive equality has two implications. First, it rules out any denial or discrimination against any individual or class on any arbitrary or unreasonable basis. And secondly, which is more important, equality permits affirmative action by way of special laws, creating special rights, and positive discrimination by way of reservations in favor of the weaker classes of the society. Now, even before the disability statutes were passed, the Supreme Court and the High Courts had passed orders to enforce disabled persons' rights to equality and right against arbitrary discrimination. For example, in 1963, a writ petition was filed against discrimination of visibly impaired persons in competing for the coveted civil services of the country, and for the government to be directed to permit otherwise blind candidates to appear in the selection examination. The Supreme Court not only allowed the petition but also directed the government to allow them to write the examination in Braille and with the help of a scribe. Now, in some judgments, you are all aware of those judgments, that responding to the writ petitions against the treatment meted out to the persons with mental disability in institutions and for their care and protection, Supreme Court laid down guidelines on their living conditions, education, training, and rehabilitation facilities in such institutions. There is one more important judgment which we have actually not quoted in the context of disability, is the Mandal Commission judgment. This was a judgment by 9 judges. This was mainly concerned with the government's decision to extend reservation in government services for socially and educationally backward classes and other economically backward classes. Now, one of the lawyers, I forgot his name, Mr. Rupta, he intervened in that matter and he claimed that the backward classes, the words backward classes of citizens, would also include the persons with disability. Now, it was held by the majority that even though backward classes of citizens, as used in Clause 4 of Article 14 and 15, did not cover persons with disabilities, the constitutional scheme and spirit of Article 14 and Clause 1 of Article 15 and 16 allowed for reservation and other kinds of affirmative action in favor of persons with disability. The court also ruled in favor of persons with disability, that is, horizontal reservation, cutting across all the categories in the recruitment, including general or open category. So today the law is that if there is 3% reservation, then this 3% is in open category, in scheduled caste category or scheduled tribe category as the category. Then right to life is of course guaranteed under Article 21, which is now interpreted very widely by the Supreme Court to include all the basic rights which require to live with dignity, like adequate nutrition, clothing, shelter, facilities for reading, writing and expressing oneself in different forms, free movement and mingling with various human beings. Now, right of housing, education, health, food are all held to be fundamental right of part of Article 21. Now, when we read the provisions of the PWD Act, we must read them in the context of the constitutional framework. Now, PWD Act defines disability to mean A. blindness, B. loss of vision, C. leprosy cured, D. hearing impaired, E. mental retardation, F. locomotor disability, and G. mental illness. Now, the person with disability is defined to mean a person suffering from not less than 40% of the disability as certified by the medical authority. Now, this act was framed on the lines of American Disabilities Act. But the American Disabilities Act covers a long range of disabilities. For instance, it also applies to persons having physically disabled conditions such as epilepsy, diabetes, HIV infection, severe arthritis, hypertension, carpal tunnel syndrome, or specific learning disability. The American Disability Act, that is ADA, also protects the person with regard to substantially limiting impairment, that is persons with a history of cancer, that is and now in remission may claim protection of that act. For instance, a person who is stuttering is not covered by the Indian Act, but he is covered by the American Act because he is having that physical condition. Now, in comparison, and again in American Act there is no provision for 40% requirement of the disability. Now, unfortunately, learning disability is not included in the definition of disability in the PWD Act, what is known as dyslexia. About 4 years back, a petition filed on behalf of a 10-year-old boy from Pune came before me. The boy was detained in second standard for 3 consecutive years by the school management. The school management took a stand that he is not normal and it is necessary to send him to a special school. On interviewing the boy, I realized that he was a case of dyslexia and there was no law with regard to dyslexia students. Finally, I issued a direction to the state government to form a committee to consider the problems of students with learning disabilities and suggest appropriate measures for bringing dyslexia students in the mainstream. The committee has recommended, firstly, reservation in all schools for the students with learning disability. Secondly, the committee also makes recommendations like giving them some concession in marks, concession in examinations. I am reminding all of you that many times you feel that your child is a dullard, he is a duffer, but remember that he may be a case of a slow learning. The committee's report was accepted by the state of Maharashtra, and today in the state of Maharashtra, the students with learning disabilities get special treatment and attention in the mainstream schools. Now recently, the Supreme Court has ruled that learning disability is covered under mental disability as defined under the Act. And as such, the students are entitled to apply for 3% that reservation in the educational institutions. The only problem with this interpretation is that a person with mental disability is not entitled to apply for employment under 3% reservation. So he may fall under that category if he is treated as a person with mental disability. Now you will find substantial portion of the Disability Act relate to the education of the disabled children or persons. Now the Act imposes several duties on the government and local authorities, such as access to free education in an appropriate government till he attains the age of 18 years. That's the statutory mandate. But in no state, I'm sure that this is fully implemented by any government. The government has no commitment to this statute. In America, the last year, the annual budget was 10%, which the America spent on the disabled or disability problems. And here there is absolutely no commitment from the government, even though the statute contemplates that it's a free education up to the age of 18 years. The second goal of the Act is integration of the students with disabilities in the mainstream schools. That also remains a distant dream. Then setting up special schools in government and private sectors and so on. Then there is a reservation of 3% for persons with disability in all government educational institutions and educational institutions with the aid of the government. And the government and local authorities are also required to frame schemes such as free transport to children, removal of architectural barriers in schools, colleges and other institutions, supply of books, free uniforms, grant of scholarship. Nothing is done in most of the states. But the judiciary on the whole has shown its sensitivity and efforts to address the concern of disabled persons. For example, Bombay High Court has granted time relaxation for writing the examination to the petitioner who was a person with cerebral palsy. The courts have also held that this 3% reservation in educational institution shall have priority over the reservation for backward classes. Now, Delhi High Court has delivered a number of judgments. Justice Sen is here. I could see many judgments on this particular High Court. Delhi High Court has struck down the Delhi government rule which prescribed that free education should be made available only to the residents of Delhi till class 10 and be subject to financial capacity of parents. This rule was struck down, I think, by Justice Mukul Mutkal, and it was held that all the persons suffering from disability are entitled to free education up to the age of 18. Another landmark judgment delivered by Delhi High Court is directing the government to frame an educational scheme in accordance with Section 30 of the Act containing specific provision for transport and other facilities. Then the Act also contains the most important provisions, that is empowering provisions, that is provisions for the employment. Now, Section 32 to 41 pertain to various aspects through which the employment rights of disabled persons are protected in the government sector. The Act requires that the government must identify the post and establishment which could be reserved for employment for the disabled. The government is duty bound to reserve in all government establishments 3% vacancies in identified posts. In any year, if the vacancy remains the seat remains vacant, it has to be carried forward. Then government has to formulate schemes on certain matters like ensuring employment of persons with disabilities, including their training, welfare, relaxation of upper age limits, regulation of employment, health, safety measures, creation of non-handicapped environment in places where disabled persons are employed. Then Section 47 is another very important section which remained dormant on the statute book till Honorable Justice Shivraj Patil delivered the judgment in Kunal Singh's case. Section 47 contemplates that if the employee has acquired disability during the employment, then his services cannot be terminated. He must be given other suitable employment on the same terms and conditions. And if other employment is not available, then a supernumerary post should be created. Now, although this provision is wholesome, the provisions about the employment are wholesome, there are some certain lacunas left in the Act. Firstly, you will notice that persons with mental illness and mental retardation are expressly excluded from the purview of the provisions for employment, irrespective of nature and extent of their disability, and irrespective of the nature of employment being sought, even though these persons are otherwise covered by the Act. I had an occasion to deal with where the government servant acquired mental disability. She was a nurse and she became a schizophrenic patient. Now the question was whether she is entitled to protection of Section 47. The Commissioner unfortunately held that since there is no reservation for mentally disabled persons, Section 47 will not be attracted. That judgment was overruled and ultimately it was held that the Section 47 would cover such cases. Now secondly, though the Act makes provision against discrimination in respect of cases where disability is acquired during the course of employment, there is no provision against discrimination where the person enters the employment in the category of disabled or he is disabled at the time of his entry in the employment. The Act is completely silent on this aspect. Justice Muddal of Delhi High Court, however, held in such that the question was whether minimum wages can be denied to a disabled person. He held that although the Act does not make any provision, looking at the statement of objects and reasons of the Act, which mandates removal of any discrimination against all persons with disabilities, the petitioner is entitled to relief. Then the Delhi High Court has also ruled that while terminating the service of employees on the ground of reduction of workload, the disabled person cannot be equated with a normal person. Then there are provisions about the access. There is one remarkable judgment of the Supreme Court which I would like to mention. That is the petition filed by Mr. Javed Abidi. He demanded that ambulances and aisle chairs should be made available for the wheelchair users by Indian Airlines. The first defense was naturally that it was not economically viable which is a plea inbuilt in the statute. The statute says, unfortunately, this is subject to the economic capacity of the government, and no deadlines are laid down in the Act. The Supreme Court directed that the demand be met and the state should plan phase-wise implementation to avoid immediate strain on the exchequer. The court also issued another important direction that the persons with locomotor disability to the extent of 80% above would be entitled to the same concession from the Indian Airlines as it is given to those with blindness. In a public interest litigation, the Supreme Court directed the chief secretaries of respective states to ensure that wooden ramps were made available for elections. Well, Honorable Justice Patil spoke about the appointment of commissioners under the Act. Unfortunately, the commissioners are not full-fledged. Their appointment is not as a commissioner, as a full-fledged post, but they also have some other commitments, and consequently, they pay very little attention to the disability sector. Then, unfortunately, as I told you, that there is no commitment from the side from the government about fixing deadlines and about the finance which is needed for implementation of the Act. Now see, as against this, the US Act provides specific guidelines for implementation with effective dates. Deadlines, then alternative arrangements are also provided. If the effective date for implementation is far into future because of undue financial burden, the statute prescribes temporary arrangement. Now before concluding, I would like to tell you a very interesting incident. One Mr. T.J. Munro, who is suffering from retardation, has started a movement called self-advocacy. He's self-advocate. So Mr. Munro, who is suffering from retardation, he attended the signing ceremony of the American Disability Bill. Mr. Munro walked up to the President George Bush and presented him with a carefully printed letter. The letter, I would like to read that letter.